Let's add Charlie in. There he is.
Hey, there he is. Mr. Matt Mallory. We are waiting for our guest. How are you, dude?
I'm good, man. How you been?
Oh, I've been living the dream. I was actually out. The reason I know people can't tell this, but the reason I'm a little frantic here is I was out gun shopping with one of my buddies and his son today.
Nice.
And his son wants to build an AR from manufactured parts. It's not like he wants to do a DIY. Yeah. So we went to a gun store and my buddy was checking out a handgun. My buddy's son was checking out all sorts of parts for ARs, lowers and barrels and uppers and grips and lower parts kits. And of course, since we live in occupied territory, he pulled the barrel out and he's like, is this a flash hider or a muzzle brake? And the general rule is if you can put your pinky in it, it's a flash hider. But he had one that was made by Troy. We pulled it up online. Troy said that it was a muzzle brake, so we went with that.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, right. I do a build your own 2A Bear BEAR rifle class.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, shall we? What's been going on with you? Sorry. Let's get an update from you before we pull our guest in.
Working around the farm. Got a bunch of weed eating done today. Cleaned out the hot tub the other day. Got a class coming up this weekend.
Nice.
Yeah, so just
we need to get a video of you doing Matt Mallory down on the farm, like Bob Evans.
You should do that.
I should. Do that. All right. Are you ready for our guest?
I'm ready. Are you?
I am ready. Before we pull him up, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Riding Shotgun with Charlie Meet the Pressers live show. And tonight we have a guest with us. It is the second person in the gun community that wears bow ties. The first one, of course, is the bow tie guy, Alan Gottlieb. But the second one is our guest, David Yamane.
Guys, you guys are looking remarkably good tonight. Not that you don't always look good, but particularly good tonight. I don't know what it is.
You look very dapper, sir. Very dapper you do.
Okay. We're just trying to keep up. So
tell the story behind the bow ties, Charlie.
So here's the story. Well, I don't know David's story behind the bow tie, but I'll tell you our story behind the bow tie. I was talking with one of my friends. I said, hey, we're going to have David Yamane on. They're like, dude, you got to wear a bow tie. I'm like, oh, great idea. I don't have one. So I found a YouTube video, and this is on Monday. We're recording this on a Wednesday. So I messaged, I sent Matt a video. I'm like, here's how we make a bow tie. We got to wear a bow tie. I've been out all day. I legit got in about 20 minutes. My computer had to start up. Matt sends me a picture of him in a bow tie. I'm like, oh no. I go to my closet. I pull out the shirt. I pull out the matching tie. I try to build the bow tie like 4 times from a regular tie. And then I realized I had a bow tie from my days as being a Chippendale. So I went to the closet and I got that.
And now you know why mine looks extra big, because it's actually a tie that I made into a bow tie just for you, David.
Dude, you got that is, I mean, I can't say enough about the effort that you guys have put into that. And I had only learned about tying the regular tie as a bow tie just this year. I never even knew it was possible.
I just learned about it Monday.
Well,
well done. I tried it today, but not successfully. So I was not actually, this is from my gigging. And if you look really close, it's got like little sparkles on it. Yeah, it was from a tuxedo I used to wear when I was gigging as a musician, not when I was a Chippendale. So, I know it's a little more exciting to say I was a Chippendale, but
anyway.
And just as believable.
It's
Chippendale Charlie.
Right.
It didn't really
didn't shock. Chippendale Charlie. That's right. That's my former gig. That's how I afforded this palatial estate that I live in.
Beautiful.
$1 at a time.
What's this one? Oh, that's stripper glitter.
The stripper glitter.
Brent said, yeah.
Right. That stuff you never can get that stuff off.
Eric, how are you, Eric?
All right. So we got a lot of people chiming in.
Yeah, we do.
before we get things rolling here, we do want to remind everybody to please go to meetthepressers.com/giveaway and enter the code PhD. I figured PhD was easier to spell than curious, so that's why we went with that. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome David Yamane, Professor David Yamane. Is it a Dr. David Yamane? I never know what the correct title is.
Well, I mean, I do have a doctorate, but I rarely call myself doctor because it just confuses people. They might ask you to do things that you're just not able to do. So I just go by Professor Yamane, or among us, David is fine.
David is fine. Awesome.
That's probably fitting, though, because attorneys are the same way. You know, when somebody thinks an attorney can do things, they can't, but screw things up.
This is true. This is true. Well, David is the author of the book Gun Curious, which he said it took, what, 13 years to write this book?
Yeah, well, including all of the time getting into it, figuring out which way was up and down, and learning how to swim in the shallow end of the pool in the world of guns. Yeah, I started in about 2012, really. Got into guns in 2011. So that's, until finishing up the book last fall, that's the time frame. So, over 10 years for sure.
That's pretty incredible. I will say this: I read most of it. I was trying to cram read it this week, but a lot of interesting stuff in here. There's some terms that you used that I used that I thought were pretty cool. There was some. There was a new term that you used that I'm blanking on, but it will come to me. You did not grow up as a gun guy. You did not grow up in a gun culture. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, the land of unicorn and rainbows, where, I come in retrospect to find that there are people who are gun owners there, but it really wasn't part of public life. And, I certainly grew up completely outside of any kind of gun culture myself. I wasn't anti-gun. It wasn't like I was crusading for gun control, but I have fairly kind of stereotypical liberal views. If anybody had asked me, like, hey, what about guns? I'd be like, what really good comes from guns? Tell me anything good that comes from guns, and I can tell you lots of bad things that come from guns. So that wasn't my main sort of political concern, but really through college, graduate school, work. And it wasn't until I got to North Carolina in 2005 and in the years following that I really started noticing guns. Guns became much more present to me, not in my personal life, but just in the lives of people around me. I saw it on billboards. I saw it on street signs. I talked to people who owned guns, and so that really started to sort of change my orientation and get me more interested in guns.
Very cool. Now, the you said in the book the first time you went shooting was with an event with your wife, correct?
Yeah, we weren't married at the time, but yeah, we would eventually be married. And she grew up sort of really in the opposite situation from me. She grew up in a rural county in a small city here in North Carolina. And, people she went to high school with were hunters. So they'd take their rifles to school in their trucks, and they'd leave school and they'd go hunting. And her grandfather kept guns above the doors in his farmhouse, and her father had a shotgun. And, guns for her were a very normal part of life. And so when I started getting sort of interested in guns, just, watching Top Shot, for example, and seeing that people use guns to do some pretty interesting things. And she talked about being in the Coast Guard and how she carried a gun. And so, I said, maybe I'd like to figure out, how to make these things safe, because I know they're dangerous. And so she set up for me to go out with one of her high school classmates and shoot on his farm in his backyard, really. And from there, I found myself going from being afraid of guns to being kind of interested in guns. After shooting probably less than 50 rounds out of that 6-hour 226, I thought, hey, that was kind of fun. It's hard to make the hole go in the paper where you want it to go. And so, we went out and did some fun shooting with shotguns and small caliber rifles. And from there, I was kind of off and running. But it was really, one of the things I say, the subtitle of the book is A Surprising Journey into Gun Culture. And probably the biggest surprise is that I took the journey at all. If you talked to me 15 years ago and said, hey, guess what? You're going to become a gun owner and write a book about gun culture, I'd be like, you're crazy. That's the furthest thing from my mind.
Yeah, right. Interesting. So you said something that made me think. You said guns aren't safe. I like to actually say that guns are only unsafe when some human touches that's not safe, more so, right? Because the guns are an inanimate object. The person touching it needs to be safe so the gun doesn't become unsafe, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things that really, again, I wasn't antagonistic to guns sort of openly, but I was just very ignorant about them.
Indifferent.
I didn't know how they worked. And very indifferent is a good term. But I thought, well, I definitely know that bad things happen when people use them. And so that's why I had this sort of aversion to or fear of them. And that was kind of my orientation going in, was, thinking that they were themselves unsafe. But as you say, that it takes a combination of a person and a firearm to make that negative outcome come about.
So, fun fact for you: after I got out of the military in the '90s in Georgia, we moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. I ran the Arby's in Research Triangle Park. Fresh out of the military, youngest general manager in Arby's history, and I actually took an acting class at Wake Forest Technical University or Technical College. Yeah.
Well, and does that paid off for you?
I don't know. It was a fun class.
I mean, I feel like
it was in the '90s.
I feel like you're using some of those skills that you learned right now.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I mean, I was always the character.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but no, it was fun. I'm glad I did it.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, that North Carolina was really a revelation to me because it was so much more public, the gun culture. It was almost like, religion. When I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, there were people who were religious, but it wasn't really open or part of the kind of public conversation or public display. And I feel like the same thing with guns, whereas, you come to the South and people are much more open about being gun owners, and they're much more open about religion. And, so those kind of things are just much more apparent here than they were when I was growing up.
For sure. I picked up, I interviewed someone in Wisconsin, and one of my friends says Wisconsin's behind the cheddar curtain, which I think is hysterical. But he said in Wisconsin, they're gun tolerant, which I thought was pretty interesting, because he's like, you can have, high cap mags and whatever, standard capacity magazines and ARs and all the stuff that, Matt and I can't have living in the Northeast. But he called it gun tolerant, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I lived 7 years in Wisconsin for graduate school, and I know there's a big hunting culture there, and also a burgeoning defensive gun culture. But the little kind of academic bubble that I was in really insulated me from a lot of that. I also lived several years in Indiana, which is a strong gun culture, but not within my blue academic bubble. So, the interesting thing was that some, just by the virtue of the people that I met and what I saw publicly, and again, watching Top Shot on TV, for example, really exposed me to guns in a way that I just never was exposed to before. And that always surprises people, because so many people grew up in gun culture. Guns, they got their first gun when they were a kid. They went shooting, as soon as they could walk. And so to meet someone like me, who's like, hey, I never touched a gun until I was 41. People are like, how do you get 41 years into life and never even touch a gun? Like, I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that is certainly interesting. You're a professor of sociology?
Sociology, yeah.
Cool. And you in your classes, you said the first class you do every semester is you take your students out and you have them shoot a handgun, shoot an AR, and shoot a shotgun.
No, so I teach a course called Sociology of Guns, and it's basically my approach to the whole field. It's kind of teaching a lot of what you read about in the book, but sort of more in an academic style. But because my first experience at the range was kind of so transformative for me, I thought, the first thing we should do as a class is not sit around in a classroom and do the usual introductions and icebreakers, but we should go to the range, learn about firearms, how they work, a little bit about marksmanship, and then give students an opportunity to shoot. And it's changed a little bit. We've never shot shotguns, but now we have settled on a Ruger Mark III, a 22 semi-automatic pistol, some version of a 9mm, semi-auto pistol, and then we shoot an AR style rifle.
Gotcha.
The students aren't required to shoot. They're given an invitation and opportunity to shoot. But in recent years, all of the students have taken that opportunity, including the majority of who've never shot a gun before or who only have extremely limited experience. So it's a
That's
great
awesome.
foundation. The students, for them, it's like a real high point. It's not like I'm forcing them to do this. They look forward to that range day, and every semester the students who are in the class have talked to people who were in the class previously, and they're nervous. Some of them are very scared, some of them are excited, but it's definitely a highlight of the class.
It's
Very
awesome
cool.
it's awesome that you do that, because there's I found, and I'm sure Charlie has too, and obviously you have, that if you bring somebody who is at least open to the idea, that it really changes minds. I mean, I'm assuming that's probably your tipping point too. When you went out, you're like, wow, I don't know what I was missing, and then you kind of
Yeah.
went on to this avenue of writing the book and such.
Yeah, and students have a whole range of responses, but a very common response is one of sort of cognitive dissonance, because a lot of them who come from outside gun culture, as I did, actually have pretty strongly negative views of guns. And, you got to think about, these are kids who were in elementary school during Sandy Hook, they were in high school during Parkland,
Yeah.
they were in college at Uvalde. So they're really like a mass shooting generation. They really are heavily burdened in their views of guns by this one particular type of very rare but very traumatizing kind of negative outcome. And so when they go to the range with that negative preconception, and then they shoot and they have fun, or they find it challenging or interesting, it really gets the mind working. Right? If you can generate cognitive dissonance in someone, it really does open them up to learning, if they're open to learning. And that's
Mhm.
really, something that I observe in the course. And, it's not like you take someone who is, for banning all firearms and they become a Second Amendment advocate, but, it definitely softens the edges. It opens them up. It helps them understand, why guns may not make sense to me, but I understand why guns would make sense to somebody else. And,
Right.
that's, as much as I can ask for. I mean, it wouldn't be appropriate to teach an academic class and try to convert people to firearms.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's all about education, right? We have to teach people how to make decisions and think and whatever, all that sort of stuff, instead of indoctrinating people. I had one friend of mine. He used to play in a band that I was in, and he would say that I was a right wing nut, and I would say he was a left wing wacko, and he would say he's a centrist, and I'd say, if you're a centrist, then I'm a centrist too. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm out of the band, become a gun instructor, all this sort of stuff. I wanted his wife his wife was an avid photographer, so I had her take some pictures of me holding the guns and at the range and stuff. And so my buddy said to me, he says, "Listen, don't let my wife shoot." I'm like, "Dude, I'm not going to let your wife shoot. Come on, I'm not." He's like, don't do this." I said, I'm not going to force it on your wife. I'm not. Like, I get it, man. I get it. So we go to the range. Somebody comes walking by with the Smith & Wesson Muddy Girl pink camouflage AR-22.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Ooh, what's that?" And he's like, "You want to shoot it?" And she's like, "Yeah." And then he's got like a purple gun, one of the Ruger, what is it, the SR-22 in purple, and she shot that, and she had a good time, and everything was cool, and that was that. He called me up at 10:30 that night. He's like, "Hey man, what did you do to my wife?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "My wife said she shot guns. You told her you didn't let her shoot guns." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't ask her. Someone else asked her, and she said yes. I had nothing to do with it." And he was pissed about this. I'm like, "Dude, I didn't ask her. I didn't tell her she needed to do it. Someone asked her. She was interested. She asked somebody else. He said yes. Who am I to say no?"
That's right. Funny.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we've got two questions here, David. This one, yeah, he did say he had an issue with typing tonight, but
how much of the burden you have? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Driven by the media.
Yeah, I think that the media definitely plays a huge role, and we have to say it's the overlap between if we say this new mass shooting generation begins with Sandy Hook, this is also when we start to see the mass proliferation of social media on personal smartphones. So, now it's not just like people turn on the nightly news and they see everything that bad that's going on. Is every moment of their lives they can pick up their phone and they see these things. And I remember I was sitting with my son just having a nice lunch at a Mexican restaurant, and his phone buzzed and he picked it up and there was a mass shooting somewhere. So, this is part of what sort of creates that trauma beyond those people who are immediately affected. And I never went to school under those conditions, but I know when my kids were in school, it was in the back of my mind. You try to keep things in proportion, but it's in the back of your mind that some disturbed person could go take a gun into the school and start shooting at people.
Right.
And so it's the effect of it is well beyond the probability. And I also kind of rationally try to tell myself, hey, my kids were in more danger driving their cars to school than they were sitting in the school. But
Still
we
scary.
make it's scary. We make plans for I'm very unlikely to get attacked and have my life threatened. But do I still carry a gun? Yes, because that low odds state proposition has very high consequences if it were to come to pass. So so I think the media always has a role in sort of distorting our perceptions of threat. But I think we also need to pay particular attention to the role of social media now, because it is so immediate and there are so
Right.
many more voices.
And it's that old saying, better to have it not needed than need it not have it. So I've had the conversation with people over the years as far as having the schools become jails, if you will. And my quick response to that, I like to get your thoughts on it. My quick response to that typically is I'd rather have them in a jail than in a morgue. We harden cockpits on planes because of what happened at 9/11. Why wouldn't we harden schools to help lessen stuff like this from happening? What's your thoughts on that? On the that thought process and that question, that statement people make?
Yeah. Well, I think you can create some kinds of deterrences without places becoming like prisons. That you just make it known to people that, hey, if you're going to come in here, that you're likely to meet some resistance, or it's not going to be as easy as you might think. And I think that alone dissuades people. There are people who are basically hell bent on doing harm are going to find a way to do it. But I think there's a lot of people who they're kind of half-hearted about it. And so if you can create any sort of obstacles, that's going to be advantageous. And I do worry about kind of this bubble wrap kind of generation of kids where we don't want them to get hurt at all. We don't want them to experience any danger, take any risk. So I think maybe because I'm Gen X and we're known for this, I think of all the things that we used to do as kids. Were basically outside of adult supervision, and we just handled our business and tried not to hurt ourselves or each other. And you learn some important lessons from doing that. So I think
Sure.
that's probably my bigger concern about adolescents today is not whether they're going to get hurt in school, but whether we're overprotecting them sort of in life in general, and they're spending way too much time just on their phones and social
Yeah,
media.
totally agree with that for sure. It's that, how many police stations and gun stores do you see get robbed during the day, or
Yeah.
get broken into or shot up? Yeah,
Yeah.
very few. So here's another question we have. Has there ever been a student that was overwhelmed by the experience?
No, I think that because they know what they're getting into, I think, and so it's not like they just show up and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh my God, I have to deal with guns." So I think that for some of them, it is a very emotional experience. And again, that's those rising emotions, and then having them reflect on those emotions is part of the educational process. But it's
Good.
also it's somewhat of self-selected audience. Everybody who comes into the class knows they have to go to the range. They know they don't have to shoot, but they know that if they talk to previous students, they know that almost all the students or all the students do shoot. So if a student is really so um, burdened by firearms, they're probably not going to end up in the class. And so I think
Sure.
that accounts for some of the that no one has really had a very sort of disturbing experience where they had to leave the range or they were shooting. Now, everybody gets to shoot 10 rounds. Some of them will shoot 2 or 3 rounds and go like, okay, that was good. I get a sense of what that's like. And that's fine. So I wouldn't want anybody to continue shooting just because they felt it was expected. And a lot of the students will walk up and, I do it individually. I'm sort of individually supervising one student shooting at a time. And they'll say, "Hey, I'm so nervous right now." I'm like, good. That's an appropriate emotional response to what you're about to do. If you've never shot a gun before and you're not nervous, I might wonder, like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
it's about, helping them to say like, yeah, it's not a trivial thing you're about to do right now. It's actually, a serious thing that can also be a lot of fun.
Right.
Right.
Just like a vehicle. Just like a vehicle.
Yep.
Here's another question.
We've got here's another question. This is one of our favorite viewers. This is the most winning viewer that we have, by the way, and he is no longer able to enter any of the giveaways that we have because he's won. He's out. Anyway, his name is Mark Lindblom. He's banned. He's banned. We call him the Bay State King of Glocks here in Massachusetts. He only has 4 safes full of guns. Anyway, his question is, what are some of your favorite instructors on mass shooting preparedness? His is Ed Monk.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this is not really my area of expertise. That I know a lot of people who do particularly sort of school security and church security. So I know Ed Monk. He's a good guy. Obviously, he knows what he's talking about. But I wouldn't want to venture my opinions. There are many more people who are more equipped to answer that question than I am.
Oh, for sure. One of the things I thought was really interesting is you've taken classes with a lot of the big name people, which I thought was really cool, particularly since you didn't grow up being a gun guy. You've become friends with and taken courses with Masada Ayub and Claude Werner and just all of the great instructors that we have here. You've worked with all of them.
Yeah, it's when I first started my research, I really didn't know anything about guns personally or professionally, and so I thought, hey, this concealed carry thing seems to be a pretty big deal. I see a lot of stuff about it around town, so I thought, oh well, I'll just do a nice, simple sociological study of why do some people choose to get concealed carry permits, and so I started down that path, and then I really realized fairly quickly that there was like the concealed carry movement was part of a broader movement within gun culture, which I came to call gun culture 2.0, stealing from Michael Bain. And so when I started looking at this broader movement toward a defensive gun culture, that's when I realized, oh, well, there's a lot of these training classes going on beyond just the concealed carry classes that you had to take in North Carolina to get a permit. So I started, trying to get up to speed on that. And soon, I started to hear some of the same names getting repeated over and over. And I actually had a very small grant from Wake Forest to get my research up and running. And part of that money I used to go to Phoenix to take Mag 40. So Wake Forest actually paid my tuition to Mag 40 and my travel to get there. And that was a really, I think, really foundational class for me because Moss, emphasizes kind of the legal and ethical framework of defensive gun culture so much. The range, I know people sort of criticize the range work, and at the time I didn't know one way or the other, but I felt like the classroom portion of Mag 40 was just vital for my understanding, and that really shines through in the book. But from there, I just started saying, oh, well, there's this place called Gunsight, and there's this guy, Tom Givens, who has this thing called Range Master and does a tactical conference. And I mean, from there, it's easy to meet all, not everybody, but a lot of the big names. I can't say that I've met everybody, but that's been getting into the defensive gun training community has been, one of the best parts of this whole process for me.
That's awesome. And
sure.
Real quick to give a plug to Tom Givens, Clint Macro, my co-host on our TV show, Meet the Pressers. We're going to be hosting him in August in Western PA. So Anybody can go to, and it's almost, class is almost full too. So if any instructors want to get in the 3-day instructor development course from Tom Gibbons in August, then hit meetthepressers.com, and up there on the events page, you can get the link to sign up for it.
All right, we do have a couple of questions. C&T asks, how many of the school shootings come down to taking away all kids' coping skills?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a particular number, but there are some patterns, obviously, that we're looking at. Typically, young, disaffected men who are obviously struggling to fit in. Sometimes they feel ostracized, oftentimes suicidal, lacking a will to live, and so I think that there are many things that we can do to prevent these things from happening, and I think we are doing a lot of things, that identifying people early on. It's obviously people are still slipping through the cracks, but there's no telling the number of people who have not engaged in this behavior because we caught them early enough. And it's just a dynamic reality that I think is how life is, that people do things before we can conceptualize that they will do them, and we're always trying to catch up and figure out, oh, well, hell, we never thought that someone would do that. Now how do we prevent it? And then you try to figure out ways of preventing it. So
Sure.
I think that we're definitely in some interesting and unprecedented times, because once one person does something, it becomes easier for the second person to do it, and for the third person to do it. And so now there is that precedent for people to build on. Well,
kind of building on that answer, David Miltrup asks, are your more to a positive colleagues open about being pro-gun, or do they whisper their secret love to you when no one is around? So are they living double lives, right?
Yeah. No, it's, as someone who grew up outside of guns, and so, even when I got into guns, there was still part of me that was kind of like, I think, subconsciously thinking, this is wrong. There's something wrong about this, or there's something to be ashamed of about this. I shouldn't be that interested in these things. Yeah. And so I, when I started to become more open about my gun ownership, that's when sort of people would come out of the woodworks from, colleagues at Wake Forest, and might say, typically in private under their breath, I'm a gun owner also, or, hey, I'm interested in guns, or could you take me to the range, or I was thinking about buying a rifle. But there's definitely a stigma around gun ownership within the university as a whole. But then, in particular, in the social sciences and humanities where I'm at, where, there was a study recently that I think 99% of sociologists identified as Democrats. So some version of liberal, which, I that's how I identify as well. And so it's not surprising, but there's really almost no ideological diversity, within certain parts of the university. And so being a gun owner is not something that is spoken of or thought of very highly.
Gotcha. So the flip side of that coin, Masada Ayub talks about the well, in the Four Horses of the Apocalypse, or the Four Horses of Your Apocalypse, that I talk about, that last one, the Jury of Public Opinion. I'll back it up this way. When it comes down to somebody using a gun in a defensive situation, they'll usually go through the mark of Cain. And the mark of Cain, friends and family will disown you, friends and family will distance themselves from you. When some of your colleagues found out that you were more gun, coming into the gun realm, did any of them distance themselves from you? Did they kind of like defriend you because of it? Or were they just kind of like, well, you're that person now, and maybe keep it at arm's length? How did that transpire?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things about becoming a gun owner later in life is most people that have known you for a long time. And so, it's harder. They have to then reconcile, okay, now he's a gun owner, but we know him. And, so they may experience some cognitive dissonance. I think within my department, my colleagues treat me pretty much, the same, but there isn't a great enthusiasm about my book, for example. So I've been talking some about, but the book has been, very warmly received by a lot of people that I know, people who, in the gun culture. But almost have this feeling of being shadow banned within the academic study of guns. So, people who are colleagues of mine in the field, haven't written and said, "Hey, congratulations on publishing your book," which would be a very common thing, or, amplifying something that you post on Twitter. And so, that silence, I think to me, speaks pretty loudly that, people are like, "Oh, this book is not exactly what we thought it was going to be."
For sure. I actually texted one of my, I call it my surrogate family. There was a time 3 years ago when I rented a room from a family, and I was 30. I was late 20s. I didn't care about politics. But, fast forward everything, they're very liberal. I found out that I'm not very liberal. But anyway, we're still friends, but we don't talk too much anymore. Anyway, I sent her a link and I said, "Hey, I know you're probably not going to watch this, but I just want to let you know tonight I'm interviewing a liberal college professor on his journey into becoming a gun owner. You might want to check it out." So I'm not sure if she's tuned in or not, but yeah, I just know with her that we don't, there are things we just don't talk about. You know what I mean? Like we don't bring up politics. We can talk everything else. We can't talk politics because we don't agree on things.
And I had several different audiences in mind for the book. One were people in gun culture, and I always told myself, like, I want to tell a story that tells the truth as I understand it about gun culture, that people who are in that culture would say, "Yeah, that's basically right," or "Yes, I can see the truth of that." It may not be exactly how I would have written it or whatever, but like,
Right.
they feel like I've done a good job of telling their story, because I don't think academics have typically told that story very fairly. So, that was audience one. The gun curious, obviously, it was another audience, people who, are interested in guns but not committed, maybe, or they want to know more. Tried to write a story that they might say, "Hey, I'm kind of interested, but I feel bad about it." But then maybe I don't have to feel bad about it. Maybe it is normal. And then the third audience was really my fellow liberals, particularly non-gun owners. I mean, obviously, liberal gun owners are already kind of in the pocket, but like liberals who don't own guns. Like, here's why gun ownership makes sense to someone who is exactly like you in every other way. And that, I think that's probably been the audience that I haven't reached as much as I would have liked to. I really think that a lot of those liberal non-gun owners, like perhaps like these old friends of yours, are just not open to hearing anything about guns that they don't already believe. And I think I may have anticipated that a little bit in the when I was writing the book, because I say in the preface, like, if you don't have a curiosity about guns, then this book is probably not for you. Like, really, if you have already made your mind up, and that also, I think, goes for people who already own guns. If you already own guns and nobody can tell you anything more about guns, you're not going to like the book either. But as a liberal, I'm most disappointed in my fellow liberals for not like challenging themselves to engage with the ideas of the book. And maybe they're all busy reading the book, but I just feel like there is this feeling of being like shadow banned. Like, somebody say something.
Right, as long as they buy it, who cares, right?
Well, like, I don't even know that they're doing that, right? I'd be happy if they just bought it and stuck it on a shelf, but I'd be happier if they rented it and at least read and engaged it. And even if they said you're an idiot, I would be happier than not hearing anything.
Yeah, you're an idiot, but you're laughing to the bank.
Right.
Well, this is a money losing proposition, by the way, given all the Wake paid for a little bit of my journey, so it didn't pay for much of it. So
right. So some of the terms that you used in the book, one of them I used in 2000. I think it was in 2016. I think I started using it about 2015, but it was gun abstinence. And I thought, I obviously can't take claim to it because you've got it written down, but I thought that was a really good term, because the anti-gun folks don't want us to be educated about firearms. They want us just to not have them and not use them and not be available and make it difficult so that we don't have them. And that's obviously not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, and I most of these things, we get from other people anyway, even if we don't remember. But I started thinking about this idea of a kind of abstinence only approach to guns because one of my students actually wrote her paper about this. She was, very much involved in sort of the safe sex movement on campus. And so she immediately saw a parallel between, what people are doing with gun control is a lot like what people who are doing an abstinence only approach to sex are doing, which is to say, just don't do it. Right. And
Right.
so then I started thinking, there's like everybody is for gun safety, but there are different understandings of what that means. And for gun owners, it's being safe with your guns. And for, gun control, a lot of gun control advocates, at least, it's about being safe by staying away from guns. Right. And that's the abstinence only approach. So, I got that from a student, in fact.
And I think like what you just said there also too, it's the people that want gun control want to stay away from guns, but they also want others to stay away from guns.
Oh yeah, for sure. Everybody should.
Yeah, everybody should. I mean, you can't have a gun, which you come from it and a lot of people in the comments have said this, and I second that or third that or fourth that because there's been a ton of them that you have a great way that you're coming about it, and we need more people like you in the industry because if anybody's going to break through to liberals that don't like guns and that want gun control, it's somebody like yourself because Charlie and I are not going to. I mean, Charlie doesn't even talk guns with that one friend that's a liberal, right?
Yeah.
So
right. Well, yeah, I'm living really in two worlds. I spend a lot of time hanging out with gun people either directly or on social media or those kinds of things, but then I spend most of my rest of my life just around other people who are liberal academics. And so really trying to translate one world to the other, I feel like I should be well positioned to do that, and that's what I'm trying to do. And whether I'm successful is, I guess, still an open question. But there are some aspects of the gun control movement who are becoming much more explicit anytime they're, say, hey, we need to do for guns what we did to tobacco, right? Well, no one is like, hey, you need to safely use tobacco. Everyone's like, hey, you cannot safely use tobacco. Don't use tobacco, right? And so anytime I hear that language, I'm like, you're really now talking about, stigmatizing gun owners for, owning guns. And that's not a productive approach at all.
Yeah, that's that connection when people say stuff like that. It's it's guns are bad. It's no, the people that touch guns are bad. That I just don't get why people don't think that. It's a Second Amendment right. There's the First Amendment right. We're not going to ban talking because people are saying superlatives and swearing left and right. It's ridiculous. Vehicles is another one. A good correlation with that. We're not going to ban cars because of drunk drivers. I mean, it's ludicrous to think something like that is is possible. Yeah. Charlie, do you want to talk about that one question that came up that you showed?
Yes, CNT here. Not only can he not type, he doesn't read very much. He wants to know if there's going to be an audiobook.
Yeah, so no one has actually bought the audio rights to the book yet. In a case like this, the people are going to try to see what the physical book sales look like, and if the physical book sales are strong enough, then someone will take the audio rights. So I'm very disappointed because I myself listen to more books than I actually sit and read anymore. So audiobooks are a big favorite of mine, and I have to look at my contract. But if at some point nobody buys the audio rights, I'll look into maybe crowdsourcing and buying the audio rights myself and pushing out an audiobook, because I think it's definitely a good way to for people to consume the work.
Right. So CNT says he reads like he types.
I thought we lost a subsubscriber when you said that.
I know, right? We got a thumb down.
The number went down of how many people are watching.
Right. We got banned all of a sudden by somebody.
That's funny.
Another phrase that's used in the book, I remember there were a couple phrases. That was gun abstinence is one of them. The other one was you were talking about the history of firearms and history of how we wanted to, at first it was rocks and then it was bows and arrows. And the term I liked was death from a distance. Like it's not, a knife is less of a threat than someone with a gun because they're a lot closer, obviously. And I thought
Yeah.
that was kind of an interesting phrase.
Yeah. Title of a book, that someone wrote, but I think, understanding the deep rootedness of projectile weaponry in human evolutionary history. Like, we literally would not be the dominant species on the planet if we didn't have this, gift for throwing and the ability to use rocks and then to fashion spears, and then, continually being able to deliver that lethal blow from a safe distance, right? Whether you're hunting game to eat to survive, or whether you're, keeping yourself physically safe and your tribe physically safe from marauding others. This is, not surprising that we continue to use projectile weaponry. And, I think the only difference really is in the United States, the government hasn't taken more of a monopoly on the ownership of these things, and that we have more of a right as individual citizens to have them in other places. That no one is proposing to completely eliminate guns. It's usually just saying, hey, citizens can't own guns, only the police or the military should have guns, because without guns in somebody's hands, you know it's going to be, we will be reversing the evolutionary process for sure.
Europe
Sure.
it'll be like Europe. Everybody uses knives. Yeah, I always say when police are when seconds count, police are only minutes away.
Right. Yeah, we have a lot of great questions coming
We
in from
do.
all of our viewers, which is wonderful. Craig asks, "Are there bad talking points you see gun owners to that are not helpful? Something that makes you shake your head in mass? I know there's no point in talking two-way as a right with our legislators. Part of your thing with the book is that you're some of the things that people say just make you uncomfortable." So I think this kind of leads into that. Are there things that gun owners should avoid talking about? Like you referenced going into a gun store and a guy, using the N-word, and you're just like, holy moly, these are not these people are not my people. Even though gun folks are my people, these people aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think of in terms of speaking across this divide, and, we have a real divide around guns in this country, is dismissing the concerns that people have about guns, right? And, that people think, oh, anti-gunners, they don't know anything about guns, and so therefore they don't have anything to say about them. And so, I think that if you are really sort of, pro gun rights and you want to advance those rights, then you should take the concerns that these people have seriously, which isn't to say I agree with them, but to say, hey, what is it about guns that make you uncomfortable? What's the problem that you really are trying to address? And really sincerely hearing those concerns, because, people have positions for reasons, and people who are opposed to firearms for reasons. Now, again, you can disagree with those reasons, but unless you sort of address them in the way that those people understand, you're basically just going to be talking past each other, in the same way that someone who is sort of anti-gun will oftentimes approach someone who's a gun owner with a whole bunch of assumptions about why you have guns and why you don't need guns, and not listen to your story, of why it makes sense to you to have guns. So, I think that's probably, the biggest thing is I think that people don't listen to each other enough, that people want to argue, they want to prove themselves right and other people wrong. And, that's not going to really get us anywhere. All of those positions are already out there.
Yeah.
Gotcha. We've got another great question from Patrick Collins, the Gun Foodie. His website is thegunfood.com, and if you enter RSWC as a discount code, you'll save 5.56%. He asks us, David, do you feel state rules are effective or detrimental to an overall safe society? We have Massachusetts, New York, California represented here. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of makes me as a liberal is the feeling that, the government can play a role in making, society work better. I don't know that the best way to do that is to ban particular items. And so I think that's really where, I sort of try to drive my, liberals who, want to just we need a law. That's basically a kind of liberal response to everything. There should be a law to take care of that. To say,
Right.
hey, maybe there are already enough laws in the books
Yeah.
that are not getting us where we need to go. Maybe we need to dig deeper into trying to figure out, how can we truly address these problems. So, I'd say generally, I don't have a problem with government regulations, and I'm not a Project 2025 guy. But I don't necessarily think that if we want to reduce negative outcomes with guns, that the best way to do that is to pass laws to regulate guns further. But I'm fine with having people having to pass background checks. I'm not in favor of violent felons owning guns. If you've been dishonorably discharged from the military, I'm fine with you not having gun rights. So, those are all limitations that a lot of us accept on who can own guns, what kind of guns, and under what circumstances. But I don't think we need to continue to add more and more and more regulations.
So
Gotcha.
what's your thoughts as far as all the illegals that have come over the border, as far as them having guns or not having guns? Should it be just for citizens, just for legal?
Man, that's such a hard one, and
Yeah.
I think it's a complex legal issue. I could more speak just kind of my gut reaction is like, that doesn't feel good. But on the other
Right.
hand, if we want to talk about people having a fundamental human right to life and to self-defense, and guns being a good uh, mechanism to ensure that, then just because you're a human being living in a country that you don't have a legal right to be, do you waive that human right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not so sure. That's a tough one.
And it's a loaded question, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's a tough one, because I'm right there with you as far as like I want people to be able to defend themselves, but I also want people to come into the country legally too. So it's it's a
Yes.
double-edged sword in a lot.
Right.
We did have one question earlier from I can't remember who it was. They're asking what your what audiobooks do you listen to?
Well, so I listen to a lot of the books that are being published about firearms now. There's
There it is.
yeah. So, any book that comes out that's kind of in my field, I try to listen to. But
Mhm.
really, what I've been trying to add in this year is reading more fiction, reading just for fun, reading to kind of check out, just to enjoy
Mm.
myself. So I just listened to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn last week while I was on vacation. So that was a recent one. I try to find, there's a lot of heavy novels. I've got a lot queued up. There's a book that just came out called Rednecks. It was sort of tells a fictional story of the Battle of Blair Mountain, which was in the West Virginia mine wars,
Hmm.
like one of the biggest conflicts, armed conflicts on U.S. soil that no one really talks about.
Wow,
But my
that's
wife
cool.
started reading it, and she's like, "Man, this is heavy." It's not like some novels you read. It's got heavy moments and then a little bit of levity, and then some. She's like, "This one is just heavy all the way through." So,
Wow.
in my mind, that's something that I want to listen to, but in my heart, when I think about I got a couple hours to hang out, on the beach and do some reading, I'm not sure that that's where I want to go.
All right, we got some more questions here. Guns and Barbecue says many anti-gunners base their stance on firearms off of their feelings. You can't have a productive conversation with someone that bases their decisions on feelings rather than facts. How do you feel about that? What's your feeling on that, Dave?
Yeah. Well, so I feel that this actually is something that cuts both ways. That I think both sides like to think that they're dealing in the world of facts, but actually
Mm.
both sides are actually dealing in the world of emotions.
Mm.
I just got my American Rifleman magazine, and I read the new executive vice president's column, and it's loaded with emotional appeals. And so, I don't think that as people who are gun owners or 2A advocates should think that, oh, we only deal with facts, because there's a ton of emotion involved there as well. And I think that's basically how human beings function. Like, we like to think the brain is in control, but really, I think our emotions, are in control, and our brain tries to override that when we can. So, I
Well
wouldn't
said.
I wouldn't approach people thinking, hey, I'm only dealing with facts and you're dealing with emotions, because I think that it goes both ways, and they probably also think that they're dealing with facts. And, that's when you have to start to say, okay, well, how are we disagreeing about what the facts actually are? And this, these are not conversations that you can have on social media, right? Or on a Twitter
sure.
exchange in 140 characters, or, these
Yeah.
things take a while to actually sit down and if you want to, and a lot of people I think don't want to, really do that kind of work. So, and it's not easy, but I've been in a lot of situations where I've been speaking across these divides. And I think if you can find the right moment, the right approach, that you can have a serious conversation where, again, we don't have to agree. There are 340 million people in this country who come from incredibly different backgrounds and have different perspectives, but it's, I think, a matter of like, understand each other and then understand why you're disagreeing, and, treat each other civilly as fellow citizens is, that's a big thing for me. Like, I can, disagree with you. If we started talking about issues outside of guns, we probably part ways pretty quickly. But hopefully at the end, we still respect each other as fellow citizens, and, say, hey, we live in a democracy and we have certain mechanisms to try to make decisions out of the disagreements that we have.
Yeah, well said. Well said, for sure. Yeah, so 340. So we're probably up to like 360 now with all the illegals, I would say.
Could be, especially if you count all the kids.
The kids, man, that's sick.
Most of those are Matt's kids, by the way.
No, I don't. I've got 4 kids. I've got 10 grandkids. It might be the grandkids.
That's what it is.
Well, we're coming down to the end of the wire here, sir. So why don't you let everybody know how they can buy your book and learn more about you and follow you on the internet?
Yeah. So, I mean, I try to keep it simple. The book is really available on any of the online platforms you'd want to order from, including, if you're conservative, you can buy it at walmart.com. If you're liberal, you can buy it at target.com. You can go to my website, sorry, I had to throw
That's
that
awesome. That's
funny.
great, man. That is really funny.
Gun Curious.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt. What?
No, I was just saying, I don't get why Target isn't pro-gun. Their freaking logo's a Target. Come on now.
Yeah,
anyway,
I know.
Right?
I know. Why is it liberal shop Target, the conservative shop Walmart? I don't know why it is. It's America.
It is. CNT says, asks if it's on Amazon. Of course,
yeah,
it's on
is.
Amazon.
Yeah, so it's on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. So any of your online retailers. It's probably not going to be just sitting in your local bookstore, but if you go into your local bookstore and ask them to order it, they should do that for you. And a benefit of that is oftentimes if someone asks to order a book, then they'll order 2 copies and sell one to you and put one on the shelf. So that helps others find the work. And if you can't afford to buy the book, go to your local library and say, hey, I want this. I want to read this book. Will you order it? And a lot of libraries don't get that kind of request very often, so they're happy to order a copy for you. So it's also available as a ebook, so that's a little bit cheaper. But $20 for the paper copy, $14 for the e-copy, and hopefully you can see my 12 years of work, paying off that $20.
I think it's a great investment. I read the hardcover copy. I know you hooked us up with a digital copy, but I like traditional books. I like putting them on the shelves. I like having a hard copy.
I'm the same way. And if you want to follow my work in general, I have a lot of different things out there on YouTube and X, Twitter, and all the Instagram. But if you just go to davidyamane.com, you can link out to all my stuff. So I'd say guncurious.com for the book. davidyamane.com for my stuff. I love to see people out there on the internet. I obviously recognize some of the names that are popping up here. I met the gun foodie at the NRA meeting. Yeah. So, it's a small world in many ways.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Well, listen, David, thank you very much. This has been a pleasure. Thanks for writing the book. Thanks for being on with us. I'm glad we finally were able to connect. I know we tried to connect. I was hoping to go down to North Carolina to do a show, but we were finally able to connect at Dallas a couple months ago, and we're able to get you on. And this has been fabulous, and it's been a pleasure. I think we should have you. I think we should have you on again with a few other people. I think that'll be kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity.
Excellent. Matt, do you want to button it up, or do you want me to?
Happy Independence Day, everybody.
Oh yes, how could we forget?
Right?
How could
Yeah,
we
I
forget?
saw that. Yes, yes.
Look at it. Not only does he show us up with a real bow tie,
But,
it's
4th
the
of July
American
bow
flag
tie.
bow tie. I know. God bless this guy. God bless him.
Not too many days of the year you can legitimately wear this tie, so I'm taking advantage.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it has been a pleasure, and I'm glad that you were able to come on with us, sir.
Yeah, this was great. So if you are watching the show, please obviously like and subscribe to both Meet the Pressers and Riding Shotgun with Charlie. Share the show with your people, because this is how we get this show out there for people. Please go to meetthepressers.com/giveaway. Enter in the code PHD. We are at the beginning of January. We're at the beginning of July. And at some point at the end of the month, we're going to do a drawing and give away a green laser SIRT pistol. And we're going to give away a Mantis X10. So that is how you enter for that. And we thank you guys all for tuning in. Again, thank you, David, for being here with us. And we will see you guys again next time. Thank you very much.
Stay safe.